Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Agenda AWANI. Now joining me on the show, I have Veronica Choo, who is the Head of Corporate Communications at Philip Morris Malaysia, an affiliate of Philip Morris International, as well as Nadirah Zakariya, an internationally published photographer. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. Now, I want to begin with something called the broken rungs. The conventional wisdom states that a woman hits a glass ceiling, so to speak, as they advance, and that prevents them from reaching senior leadership positions. But in reality, recent research has found that the biggest obstacle when it comes to women in the workplace is that first step to becoming a manager, or the broken rung. They can't seem to climb that corporate ladder. Now, Veronica, as a communications lead at Philip Morris Malaysia, I mean, your role is really quite important. I mean, you set the strategic direction for the public relations campaigns. You've got to kind of raise the image of the company. At the same time, if there are any business challenges, you've got to address that too. So I want to ask you about this phenomenon. Have you observed it in Malaysian MNCs, which are traditionally male-dominated, but also in this industry specifically, which is very heavily regulated? Have you observed this broken rung phenomenon?
To be honest, I come from a very interesting mix of background. And I have to say, when I first started in the agency world, you don't feel it that much, because I feel agency world has a little bit more of a diversity of female and male. When I jump over to the corporate side, I do have to admit, you can see it a little bit clearer. That woman has to, yes, you can see that female has to work double hard sometimes to prove a point. And I think what we needed to do is to ensure that our voice are listened to.
Right. Was it difficult for you to overcome the broken rung, do you think?
Yes and no.
In what way?
Well, yes, in a way that the industry I joined, prior to Philip Morris, I was with a pharmaceutical company. And pharmaceutical itself is also quite male-dominated to a certain extent, yeah. And for me to rise in a management level of a pharma company is also something quite difficult. I can easily say when we are there, we are trying so hard to make a balance of diversity, so that women leaders are almost equal to male leaders. Then I was fortunate enough, opportunities were given, diversity is very well practiced. So when I entered Philip Morris, same thing, it's a very male-dominant industry. And when I entered, we can see that more and more women leaders are coming up.
Okay, so that was an evolution you saw within your career. Wonderful. Nadirah, what about you? I mean, I don't want to ask you what it's like to be a female photographer. I feel like that's a question no male photographer will get. You know, nobody will ask, how does it feel like to be a male photographer? They would ask that in an interview. But there's no denying that your industry is one that is also male-dominated. So talk to me whether you feel there's gender inequality within this industry.
I feel like for me as a female photographer, it's something that I always have to prove myself. I mean, I've been in this industry, I've been photographing for a decade now, and yet I still have to, this is what I've done. Instead, compared to my male colleagues or other male photographers that just came out, they get the job so easy. I think clients still trust men more. And for me, I've just always had to continue to fight and kind of pave my own way.
Do you feel that, you know, the work of a female photographer is judged more harshly than men? I mean, you have 10 years of experience.
I think we get scrutinized more, we get questioned more so than compared to other male photographers. And yes, like one of the questions that I always get is, how does it feel to be a female photographer? And I always say it's the only type of photographer I know how to be, you know.
We can't answer
I
the
know.
other way,
yes,
right?
Yes.
What's the, I mean, if in answering those types of questions, are there stereotypes that you face as a female photographer?
All the time. Like, you know, I'll walk into set and people would think I'm the intern. But then sometimes I just let them sort of believe that and then
underestimate you.
Underestimate me,
like
and then I just do my work. I'm like, oh, she's the photographer, she's the director, and yeah, like for me, I just have to stay focused on my work and not get too sidetracked with, you know, all those other things that I feel that to me it's sort of become a norm. But then sometimes I pause and be like, wait a minute. you know, this guy doesn't have to experience that.
Right. Okay. So it is almost like a, you know, a realization, right?
Yeah.
How did you first get into this field? I mean, you said you've been working in 10 years.
Yes.
Has that always been the field of choice?
Yes.
Okay.
So I went to school for photography, and coincidentally, we went to the same university
So
in
Fashion
New York.
Institute
Of Technology.
Technology in
Yes.
New York. So both of you.
We have to say, it's not just about fashion design only.
Yeah. So
They have produced good female
photographers.
photographers
Yes.
and female leaders as well.
All right,
Yes.
so it's really about communication, right? Communicating your art, so through you know public
Yes,
relations and all that, and
yes.
through your kind of lens, so to
Yes.
speak, right? Okay,
So yeah, so I went to school for photography, got my degree, and I've been working in the industry ever since.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, and what about you, Veronica? Because you know your journey is also interesting. So it started with Fashion Institute Technology, but
Yes.
most previously, as you said, you worked with Sanofi, Big Pharma,
Yeah.
and then you made the jump to Big Tobacco. And I want to talk to you about that because a woman, you have children.
Yes, I do.
Was that a decision that gave you some pause in the beginning?
A lot of pauses, I have to say. I think Philip Morris has been in conversation with me for a long time to get me convinced that what they're doing today is not what they used to do. Because my stand was very clear to them when they first gave me a call. I told them, you know, I will work for all industry except tobacco industry. So I don't think I'm a right match. And they kind of took, I think, more than 5 months to convince me that their journey on transformation is different. And because of that, I went into major research to find out whether they are for real, really. Even I had skepticism, you know. So I went to read about the science, I went to read about their transformation journey and what the new things they're coming up with and what the new things they are coming up with that's better than the traditional business.
Well, explain a little
Yes.
bit. So explain a bit the reservation. So why not Big Tobacco? Why was Big Tobacco the only thing that was
Okay.
you know, off limits? But what did you discover in that research of yours?
Yes. In the research, what I realized is what they have invented on scientifically that's well proven, which is their better alternatives. And because I have relatives, very close relatives, uncles and very close friends who is actually smokers, really. And for many, many years, we have trying to tell them it's bad for your health, you know, and especially when I see them contracted with throat cancer, nose cancer, I say, can you stop it? I mean, you see what's happening to you. And it seems that they already know what's going to cause them when they smoke. So to me, if we can't tell people to stop quitting, then at the very least, we give them a better option. So the better alternative that I mentioned, when I read it, I saw the science behind it. It's not a fly-by-night science, it's actual science. And though even a lot of people argue with me, but it's their website. Obviously, they'll say good science. I say yes, but I also went into research on all the independent papers that actually support their science. I think my background when I work in pharma helps.
Okay, because you know,
yes,
you would know
yes,
a,
correct,
you know, a
correct.
legitimate medical journal when you see
Correct,
one.
correct. So it helps a lot. So it took me a lot of research to come to the decision that if I can't change the world by telling people to stop smoking, at the very least I will tell those smokers who actually have rights to choose to give them a better alternative. So that drives me to join them. And when I joined them, they were very careful with me because they know that
You were
when it comes
skeptical?
to, yeah. And when I went in, I was very surprised. I look at the organization and they have close to 50% who don't smoke in their organization. I thought when I enter,
Right.
I'm going to find lots of smokers. You know what I
Sure.
mean? So when I went there, I was like, wow. I say, I'm so surprised.
So 50% of Philip Morris Malaysia employees
They
don't smoke?
Don't smoke,
Okay.
yes. And I was like, wow. I said, that is shocking, you know. And I kind of see how they practice very respected way of respecting people who don't smoke.
Okay.
So I used to remember, I have friends telling me, you know, in tobacco companies, usually you go in meetings, is everyone light up a cigarette and start smoking and smoked up the room, you know. So I kind of had that thing at the back of my mind.
And that's not the case? So you're not walking into secondhand smoke?
No, actually, no. In fact, they were very, very strict. If anyone complained with the surface, they would immediately take action. Because we have a lot of women who works there, who are mothers,
Yep.
who don't smoke. And I think how they respected their choice and their preference, I think that is very amicable.
Wonderful. Let's
Yes.
come back and continue this discussion, particularly about your work with the Unsmoke campaign. We'll be right back. Stay with us in just a couple of minutes. See you soon. welcome back to Agenda AWANI. I'm Melisa Idris. I'm speaking to Veronica Choo from Philip Morris Malaysia, as well as Nadirah Zakariya, an internationally published photographer. Let's talk about the Unsmoke campaign. I'm going to throw this to you, Veronica, because this is part of Philip Morris International's campaign, which trickled down to Philip Morris Malaysia. Now, when it comes to these types of campaigns from Big Tobacco, many people, myself included, will be initially skeptical, right? So your job as lead of the communications team, how do you convince people otherwise, when you talk them through the rationale of this campaign?
Okay, when Unsmoke Your World was brought on by Global to us in beginning of the year, it took us very long to digest. Actually, the instruction was all markets has to roll it out, but it took us all the way until November to launch it. It's because when I first hear it, my reaction is a little bit like yours. And I wonder, what is this all about,
Right.
So I'm also trying to find a way, Unsmoke Your World, it brings a lot of good messages, especially the triplets. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit. If you don't quit, then change. And I thought that triplet rings to many layers in the society.
Could you repeat that again? So if you don't smoke, don't start. If you
smoke,
stop
quit.
or quit.
If you don't quit,
change.
Okay. Yes.
All
So
right.
I thought that one rings many bells in many layers of society, whether you're a smoker or non-smoker. But how do I get that out to the public for them to understand, and especially for people who believe in what we do, especially coming out from a tobacco company. So the journey was difficult, and I wanted to do something that is relatable. I love arts, and I think Malaysia has fantastic local artists, be it a photographer, be it an artist who paints, be it an artist who design, or be it fashion designers. I think we have many talents. And I wanted art as a driver for us to communicate to the society.
Okay.
And I thought photography was the best, because through the lens of camera, you can capture many angles of what Unsmoke Your World means to you.
Right.
So when we did a selection of photographer, back to what Nadirah just said, a female photographer, it was very difficult because the first sets of recommendation that came to us were all male photographers.
Okay.
And I had very strict criteria. I wanted it to represent our three main races of Malaysia, the Malay, Chinese and Indian. And I want a good mix, if possible, female and male.
So you want a real
Yes.
diversity, because
Yes.
I guess through diversity is the expression that you will see, right?
Yes,
Nadirah, what was it like to work on this Unsmoke project as a photographer?
As a photographer, it was actually really good because because they gave me total creative freedom. So obviously, I think like your reaction, Philip Morris exhibition, I first had my reservation. I'm like, what is this project? What do they want from me?
Right.
But then when they explain, the triplets, if you don't smoke, don't start. I was sold on that already because it was already delivering like a good message and something that I wanted to be behind. And then when I really understood, if you smoke, quit, and if you can't quit, change. Like, yes, like why not? And one of the most important thing was I didn't have to do any product placement. So
Okay.
for me as an artist to
Wow.
be able to do whatever I wanted, it was kind of like, whoa, I'm not used to this.
Which is very different from
Yes,
most
it is.
clients.
Yes.
They want their brand front and
Yeah.
center.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
actually, the criteria made by Global is this. When you do an Unsmoke campaign or movement or launch, one strict guideline that you cannot attach to Unsmoke is product.
Yeah, because also this
Yeah,
industry
so-
is quite regulated, right? So advertising,
yes,
all that
of
is
course,
very
of
regulated.
course, yeah. And they made it very clear that do not put Unsmoke Your World and my product or whatever product that you have. So I think that was a very
Yeah.
good first step for us to
Yeah.
take.
Well, why do you think, you touched on this a bit earlier, Veronica, why do you think, Nadirah, that photography, that art, that photos is a good way to communicate this message?
I think there's something about photography that when people look at it, it's a powerful tool, I think. It doesn't need to be something so literal. People can come back and take what they want. So it's pretty open-ended, just like any art. And I think photography is just one medium. And I think definitely this topic can be explored in many different art mediums
Could
as
you
well.
explain your process, the inspiration? So you had
Yes.
full creative
Yes.
freedom, the brief was really open. How did you translate that into your work? What did you photograph?
Well, so the bigger the brief, the more open, the harder actually
exactly,
is, because it could go
exactly.
anywhere. But then I
Yes.
told myself I wanted to do something that I truly loved. So I took this opportunity to create something that I'm passionate about, and I wanted to create something beautiful. So I worked with flowers. So my whole idea was, what if we changed cigarettes with flowers? So
Oh,
it's
so someone smoking a flower?
yes, like holding flowers, flowers in ashtrays, scattered flowers on the ground instead of cigarette butts. So it's kind of like taking the idea of, wouldn't it be more beautiful and better for the environment, kind of literally, and had fun with it. So I spent 2 weeks in an empty home, like this old-fashioned house, and just every day going in with different flowers and spending time. Was a very therapeutic process for me as well. So
I love that concept. It's such a wonderful way to look at things. But again, I mean, it's a very creative idea. But coming back to the crux of the Unsmoke Your World campaign, Philip Morris is big tobacco, right? Does this mean that you're going to end up one day no longer selling cigarettes?
I have to be honest. If you hear what our CEO has been preaching around the world through all his interviews, we do hope one day we can phase out cigarette. But for now, we have to be realistic. If we were to do that, that's not a solution to the problem that we're facing. And what we wanted to address is, at the very least, give them an option, an alternative that they can explore. So all we wanted the smokers, the legal age smokers, to do is practically look at alternative. You really can't smoke. I mean, sorry, if you really can't quit, look at the alternatives, but be educated about your choice. Because I think every alternative that's available in the market, there's always a science that backs it up. Go through it, read it, and choose something that you feel is better for you, and it is something that you can help you do the conversion from cigarettes to the better alternatives.
Okay, so this was all part of the message, right? And
correct.
I take it this is the first event that you guys have worked on together. Are there other plans for different types of events within this campaign?
There will be, because Unsmoke Your World isn't a marketing campaign or a PR campaign that we throw out.
It's not a short-term thing,
yes,
right? Okay.
Yes, it's a movement that we hope that can be by the people, for the people, so that we do hope one day it can organically grow on its own, and people will start having conversations, which are very important.
Okay.
Whether the conversation level is on please quit, and then look for all the programs, quitting program which the government has put in place, which I think is very good, and everyone should try it to quit first, and if you can't, at least have a conversation on what is better for you. And then look through all the research that's available, whether it's through online or through their own particular alternative places that they are selling it, to really study this properly before they make a choice.
Wonderful. Okay, let's continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Astro AWANI. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with Astro AWANI. I'm Melisa Idris. I'm speaking to Veronica Choo from Philip Morris Malaysia, as well as Nadirah Zakariya, photographer who was working on the Unsmoke Your World campaign with Philip Morris Malaysia. Now, let's move on to some other things about gender equality within the workplace. The gender wage gap is a real issue in Malaysia. According to the Statistics Department, last year, the average male Malaysian employee had a median salary of 2,342 ringgit a month. You compare that to what a woman would make a month, 2,227 ringgit. There is a disparity there. Now, what is Philip Morris's stand on this? Because I know that Philip Morris Malaysia obtained the Equal Salary Certification, which is the first company in Malaysia to do so. So kudos to you guys.
Thank
but
you.
I mean, how did you have to achieve that? That must have been a difficult conversation to have in terms of addressing the gender pay gap.
Yeah. As I mentioned, in Philip Morris Malaysia or Philip Morris International as a global company, to us, diversity is a very important key factor for us, whether it's on salary perspective or respecting female versus male needs of colleagues that are very well addressed. For equal salary certification, it's not an easy certification.
Sure.
We went through a robust auditing to make sure that our pay scales are equally paid, meaning you're paid for the number of work that you have contributed so that it doesn't get disparity.
Okay.
A lot of times people, I'm sure you have heard of complaints that saying that, you know, I work so hard, but look at my pay, you know, and because I'm women, that's why they pay me lower. Actually, in Philip Morris, that is something that we ensure that we addressed it. So if that person is being recruited to do a certain role, that person is compensated at the very least at market value, if not higher. So we do not discriminate it to the extent that because today you come for an interview, a male come for an interview because you're female, and both of you have equal skill sets and equal experience, and he gets more than you just because he's a male. That's highly not acceptable in the company, and I've seen it being practiced.
And I think it's important to have you know, the policy come from the corporate level, right? As opposed to certain managers with implicit bias. You know, sometimes it comes out when it, you know, in the hiring process, in the remuneration process. What about the photography industry, Nadirah? Is there a gender pay gap in photography?
I think with the creative industry in production photography, I think it's sort of the same for men and women. I think we're still struggling to get the payment that is sort of enough. I think people just...
Or commensurate with the work,
yes,
right?
yes, yes,
The
yes,
value
yes.
of the work and the content that
exactly.
you put out.
I think I share that struggle with my male artists as well. Yeah.
So, and that's a good point, because I think it's important to bring men into the conversation. When we want to address kind of gender inequality, it's not about, it's not a trade-off. It's not about one person, you know, winning at the expense of another. So bringing men into the conversation is very important. When you talk about being in the creative industry in Malaysia, what are the specific challenges? Now, I kind of wonder, you know, in Malaysia specifically, the creative industry is not often as, I wouldn't say celebrated, but seen, the worth that it contributes to the economy as large, to the collective brain of the country. What are some of the challenges that you face working locally?
I think pushing clients to accept new ideas. I think a lot of, you know, clients, they're very safe and they're scared to try something new. Yeah. So I think as a creative, like, giving them the confidence to be like, you know, push, we can try something new. And that's also bringing back to the Unsmoke campaign. This is completely something new and radical. So I was all for it.
And honestly, that Unsmoke campaign internally is also a convincing stage.
Was it difficult for you
to
say, you know, to say to your team, I would like us to give the creative full liberty to do whatever he or she wants to do?
Even within the management team. And they are like, full creativity. What happens if they come up with a picture that is so controversial? What happens if they come up with a picture that is illegal? I said, what do you mean by illegal?
No, even as a creative, like, full creative freedom. Like,
unheard of, yes. And I say that, you know, the photographers that we select, we went through such strict evaluation that we had to ensure that they are very professional in the way they capture. And what makes the management really nervous is 3 of them are non-smokers.
Yes.
And it took 3 of them, actually took me time to convince them to take the work.
It took a while for me to say yes.
Even including David, including Shikha. Same thing. It took us a while.
But that's a wonderful lens to have, right? You know, you are looking at an Unsmoke Your World campaign through the lens of a, you know, non-smoker, and I think that's very relatable to a lot of people, given the messaging of Philip Morris. Okay, so in a couple minutes that we have left, let's talk about the future. What is next for Philip Morris Malaysia?
Well, I think for us, the journey for Unsmoke Your World will not stop here today. Next year we'll have more. And I would love to use art as a platform to continue to communicate to everybody so they can start having meaningful conversations, no matter whether they are smokers, non-smokers. So I think that will continue. Keep a lookout. It will be more exciting, but I would almost be sure that it will be more relatable to everybody.
So the idea is to kickstart the conversation, keep that conversation going, and have people, the more people who talk about it, the better, right?
Yes.
Nadirah, you have done some directing work.
I have.
You have, right? Is this a new area that you're going to pursue?
Possibly, this year alone I've directed 10 music videos. And so I think...
It's been a productive year.
Very productive. So it was also meaningful for me to be able to do a photography project. But next year I'm keeping my hearts open to projects.
Is this an area that is more challenging, do you find, than photography? Directing it is?
Yes, it's directing is sort of the same as I'm directing photography, but I think working in a big production.
I
but
see.
I love it. I love challenges, and with every project, I learn something new. And
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
It's such
Thank
a
you for
pleasure
having us.
talking to you.
Thank
both.
you.
Pleasure's ours.
That's
Thank
all
you.
the time we have for this episode of Agenda Awani. I'm Melisa Idris signing off. Thank you for watching, everyone. Good night.